Private Kim crouched behind a fallen wall, breathing hard. Explosions lit up the night sky over New Horizon Colony. His hands trembled on his standard-issue rifle. Kim had always been the smallest soldier in the 87th Terran Defense Battalion. His fellow soldiers called him Tiny or Runt when they thought he couldn't hear. Kim wiped sweat from his brow and tried to remember his training. Just yesterday, he had failed another combat simulation. Drill Sergeant Park had shouted at him in front of everyone. "Kim, if this were real, you'd be dead. Your weakness puts your whole team at risk." Now it was real. The Terok Empire had attacked without warning 3 days ago. These aliens weren't like humans. They stood nearly 8 feet tall with natural armor plating and enhanced strength. Their elite warriors, the Night Hunters, wore advanced exoskeletons that made them even more terrifying. Kim's unit had been ordered to help evacuate civilians, while the main forces tried to hold back the alien advance. Nobody expected the 87th to actually fight. They were considered too green, too untested. "Stay together. Move to Checkpoint Delta." Lieutenant Choi had shouted as they hustled frightened colonists onto transport ships. But then the Teroks had broken through sooner than expected. Kim remembered the chaos. Running civilians, soldiers shouting conflicting orders, and the terrifying sound of Terok weapons. In the confusion, Kim had become separated from his squad. He'd spent the last 6 hours hiding, moving through the ruins of what had been a beautiful colony just days ago. New Horizon had been a jewel, one of humanity's most successful outer settlements. Now it was a battleground. Kim checked his comm unit again. Still no signal. The Teroks must be jamming communications. He was truly alone. A mechanical humming sound made Kim press himself flat against the ground. Through a gap in the rubble, he saw them. 3 Night Hunters moving in perfect formation. Their armor gleamed in the firelight, advanced sensors sweeping the area methodically. They moved with terrifying precision, like predators sure of their hunt. Kim held his breath. His training had taught him that Night Hunters had never been defeated in battle across 3 galaxies. They were the elite of the Terok military, sent only when total victory was required. One of the Night Hunters paused, its helmet turning toward Kim's hiding spot. Kim's heart pounded so loudly he was sure the alien could hear it. A moment later, the hunter moved on, following its companions around a corner. Kim released his breath. He needed to find his unit. Staying still meant death. For the next hour, Kim moved carefully through the ruins of the colony. He saw signs of battle everywhere. Destroyed vehicles, weapons scorched by energy blasts, and worse. He tried not to look at the bodies, both human and Terok. As Kim approached what had been the colony's administration center, he heard voices, not human voices. A harsh, clicking language of the Teroks echoed from inside the damaged building. Kim hesitated. Training said to avoid enemy concentrations, to regroup with friendly forces. But something made him pause. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was the memory of Sergeant Park, telling him he'd never make a real soldier. Moving silently, Kim found a ventilation shaft leading into the building. It was small, too small for the massive Teroks, but just right for the smallest member of the 87th Battalion. Inside, Kim crawled through dusty ducts, following the alien voices. He emerged in a ceiling panel above what had been the colony's central command room. Below him, a dozen Teroks worked at modified human terminals. Holographic displays showed the colony and surrounding territory. Kim's eyes widened as he realized what he was seeing. This wasn't just a random group of invaders. This was a command center. The Teroks were coordinating their assault from here. Maps showed human positions, evacuation routes, and planned attack vectors. A larger Terok entered the room. The others immediately straightened in what Kim recognized as a military salute. This was clearly a commander. The commander barked orders, pointing at different sections of the map. Even without understanding the language, Kim could tell they were planning something big. The commander activated a larger hologram that showed the remaining evacuation ships. Kim's blood ran cold as he understood their plan. The Terraks weren't just invading. They were planning to trap and destroy all remaining humans on New Horizon. Kim carefully took out his datapad. Though the communications were jammed, he could still record. He began capturing images of the tactical displays, the commander, and the coordinates shown on their maps. If he could get this information back to any human forces, it might save thousands of lives. As Kim recorded, he noticed something else. The Terraks were following strict protocols. Their patrols moved in precise patterns. Their command structure was rigid. Everything about them suggested beings who relied on order, precision, and overwhelming force rather than adaptation. A terrifying thought formed in Kim's mind. What if that was their weakness? Humans had always survived by adapting, by doing the unexpected. The Night Hunters had never been defeated because they had never faced an enemy who didn't fight according to predictable military doctrine. Kim wasn't a good soldier by Terrak standards, or even by human standards. But maybe that was exactly why he might stand a chance. As Kim carefully backed away from the opening, a plan began to form in his mind. He knew where the Terrak command center was. He had information about their patrols and tactics. And most importantly, he was underestimated. Just a single, unremarkable human soldier that no one would see as a threat. For the first time since the invasion began, Private Kim felt something other than fear. It was a dangerous feeling, perhaps even a foolish one. But as he slipped out of the ventilation system and into the night, Kim carried with him not just vital intelligence, but also the first spark of hope. The weakest soldier in the 87th Battalion was now the most dangerous human on New Horizon. For 3 days, Kim watched the Terraks from his hiding spot. He had found a small maintenance room in an abandoned research facility. The aliens never checked it. They were too big to fit through the narrow entrance, and their scans didn't penetrate the special walls made to block radiation. Kim sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed. In his mind, he could see the patrol routes of every Terrak squad he had observed. They moved like clockwork, precise, regular, and completely predictable. This was something Kim had always been able to do, though he never realized how special it was. As a child, Kim could watch a complex game once and understand all its rules. He could look at a crowded street and remember every face. When he played chess with his grandfather, he could see patterns 10 moves ahead. But these gifts never showed up on tests. School had been hard for him. Sitting still, following instructions, filling in bubbles on standardized tests. The military had been no different. "They think I'm stupid," Kim muttered as he drew patrol routes on a piece of scrap paper. "But I see it all." What Kim saw was that the Terraks, for all their strength and advanced technology, were inflexible. Their patrols passed the same spots at exactly 7-minute intervals. Their communications used the same encryption patterns. Their armor, while nearly impenetrable from the front, had cooling vents on the back that briefly opened every 15 minutes. Kim looked at the pile of materials he had collected. Dead soldiers' comms units, broken Terrak weapons, parts from damaged security systems. To anyone else, it was junk. To Kim, it was a toolkit. He picked up a human comm unit and a piece of Terrak technology that had fallen from a damaged warrior. Kim had watched the aliens long enough to understand how their communications worked. Their helmets received signals on specific frequencies that could be hijacked. With quick fingers, Kim modified the comm unit, connecting it to the Terrak component. He tested it, adjusting tiny wires until he heard the clicking language of the aliens come through clearly. He couldn't understand the words, but he could record and replay them. "Perfect," he whispered, setting it aside. Next, Kim examined a piece of Terrak armor he had scavenged from a dead warrior. The material was unlike anything he had seen before, not quite metal, not quite ceramic. But the inside was lined with sensors that connected to the neural implants all Terraks seemed to have. Kim studied it carefully, thinking about the way the aliens moved. They relied heavily on enhanced senses, better vision, sharper hearing, even detection of heat signatures. But enhanced senses could be overwhelmed. Working through the night, Kim modified a sonic emitter from a mining tool he found. He calibrated it to produce a specific frequency, not to harm, but to confuse. When activated, it would send a signal that would interfere with the Terok neural implants, making it impossible for them to process what their enhanced senses were detecting. Like static on a radio, Kim explained to himself, their brains won't be able to understand what they're seeing. By morning, Kim had assembled 3 devices: the communication interceptor, the neural disruptor, and a simple trap made from pressure plates, salvaged from the facility's security system. Time to test them. Kim waited until exactly 600 hours, when he knew a Terok patrol would pass below the facility. He crawled through the ventilation system until he was positioned above their expected route. Sure enough, 3 night hunters appeared, moving in their perfect triangle formation. Kim dropped his trap silently behind them. The pressure plate landed without a sound, waiting for the next patrol that would pass this way. Returning to his hideout, Kim monitored the modified comm unit. At 7:30, he received his first Terok transmission. Their language was impossible to understand, but the patterns were clear. Status reports every 30 minutes. Patrol check-ins at specific times. Emergency codes that followed predictable sequences. Kim recorded several transmissions, then began to experiment with replaying them at specific times. When he played a standard check-in signal precisely when one was expected, the response from the Terok command was automatic, an all-clear acknowledgement. They don't verify who's sending the signal, Kim realized. They just check that it comes on schedule and has the right format. That night, Kim heard a satisfying crash and alien shouts of confusion. His pressure plate trap had worked. A Terok patrol had stepped on it, triggering the release of a hanging net made of metal cables. It wouldn't hold them long, but it proved his theory. The aliens could be caught off guard if something happened outside their protocols. Over the next days, Kim expanded his arsenal. He discovered that Terok vision was particularly sensitive to certain light frequencies. He modified the facility's emergency lights to produce exactly that kind of light. He found that their communication systems couldn't distinguish between real signals and identical fake ones. One by one, Kim identified 7 critical weaknesses in Terok systems. 1. Their rigid patrol schedules that never change, even when they should too. Their reliance on automated communications that weren't verified. 3. Their neural implants that could be disrupted by specific frequencies. 4. Their armor's cooling vents that opened on a predictable schedule. 5. Their inability to process certain light patterns that confuse their enhanced vision. 6. Their hierarchical command structure that couldn't function without constant communication. 7. Their complete dismissal of humans as a serious threat. For the first time since joining the military, Private Kim felt truly confident. He might not be strong. He might not be a good shot, but he could see patterns that others missed, and he could exploit them. Time to hunt the hunters, Kim whispered as he finished assembling his final device. A small drone made from medical equipment and Terok sensors. The drone would fly ahead of him, mapping patrol routes and identifying individual warriors by their unique helmet signatures. Kim packed his improvised weapons into a bag. He checked his combat knife, the only standard-issue weapon he had kept. Everything else would just slow him down. As darkness fell, Kim slipped out of his hiding place. In his mind, he could see the complex web of Terok movements throughout the colony. He knew exactly where to go and when to move. The hunters had their patterns, but now so did he. And his pattern was going to tear theirs apart. Kim crouched in darkness, watching 3 night hunters patrol the street below. They moved with perfect coordination, their heavy armor gleaming under the colony's emergency lights. Each carried a plasma rifle that could cut through tank armor. Kim held only a small device he had built from scrap. 3, 2, 1, Kim whispered, pressing the button. The device emitted no sound that human ears could detect, But the night hunters suddenly stopped walking. Their helmets jerked left and right. One dropped to its knees. Another clawed at its helmet as if in pain. The third fired its weapon wildly at nothing. Kim didn't waste time. He slipped from his hiding place and moved quickly toward the confused aliens. Their neural implants were overwhelmed by the sonic pulse, making it impossible for them to process what they were seeing or hearing. The first hunter didn't even notice as Kim approached from behind. Kim found the cooling vent on its back armor, now open in its regular cycle. He slipped a small device inside, another sonic emitter, but stronger. When it activated, it would overload the hunter's neural systems completely. Kim moved to the second hunter, then the third, planting his devices with quick, precise movements. Then he retreated to a safe distance and activated them with a remote signal. All three warriors collapsed instantly, their systems shut down by the precise frequency that Kim had calculated. They weren't dead. Kim couldn't bring himself to kill helpless enemies, but they would remain unconscious for hours. Kim collected their weapons and communication devices. He disabled the tracking beacons in their armor and dragged the heavy bodies into an abandoned building where they wouldn't be found immediately. First test successful, Kim said to himself as he examined a Terok plasma rifle. The weapon was designed for hands much larger than his, but he quickly figured out how to modify the grip. At the Terok Command Center, Commander Rock received the report of a patrol missing. The massive alien commander slammed his fist on the holographic display. Impossible. Find them, he ordered, his translator converting his clicks and growls into human language for the benefit of the few human collaborators working with the Teroks. Could it be human resistance? Asked his second-in-command. Rock laughed, a harsh sound like stones grinding together. The humans have no organized resistance left. Their soldiers are weak and predictable. Send Drac Squad to patrol Sector 7. They will find our missing warriors. Drac Squad was elite even among the Night Hunters, 5 veterans of a dozen planetary conquests. They moved out immediately, eager to find the missing patrol. Kim watched them from his new hiding place in what had been a hospital before the invasion. His small drone followed the elite squad, transmitting their movements directly to Kim's modified datapad. They were heading toward where the first patrol had disappeared. Kim touched his earpiece, now tuned to Terok frequencies. He could hear their communications, still in their language, but he had learned to recognize certain patterns. They were scanning for human life signs, confident they would find the enemy. Kim smiled. His modified medical equipment was masking his vital signs. To their sensors, he didn't exist. The Drac Squad entered a narrow street between tall buildings. Kim had prepared this location carefully. Emergency lights had been rewired to project specific patterns of light and shadow. Reflective surfaces positioned at key points would magnify the effect. Kim pressed another button on his remote. The lights activated in a precise sequence. To human eyes, it would look like random flashing. But to the enhanced vision of the Teroks, with their neural implants tuned to detect specific patterns, it was overwhelming. The light hit the reflective surfaces and created a cascading pattern that exploited a flaw in their visual processing. Through his drone's camera, Kim watched all 5 elite warriors freeze in place. Their enhanced vision, normally an advantage, had become a weakness. They were completely blind, their neural systems unable to process the confusing input. Kim moved quickly. He approached the first warrior from behind, placing a sonic disruptor on its armor. One by one, he did the same to each member of the elite squad. But the last warrior sensed him somehow. It swung around, firing its weapon blindly. The plasma blast hit the building next to Kim, showering him with hot debris. Kim felt a sharp pain as a piece of metal cut his arm. The Terok warrior fired again, sweeping its weapon back and forth. Kim dropped to the ground, rolling under the plasma beams. He couldn't place the disruptor on the warrior's back now. It was too alert despite its blindness. Kim thought quickly. He pulled out the modified Terok communicator he had taken from the first patrol. He activated it, sending a specific emergency code he had recorded earlier. Immediately, the warriors stopped firing. The code signaled an all clear from command, a false message that Kim had crafted perfectly. The warrior lowered its weapon, confused by the conflicting information. In that moment of hesitation, Kim darted forward and placed his last disruptor on the warrior's armor. Seconds later, all 5 members of the elite squad lay unconscious. Kim bandaged his wounded arm with supplies from his pack. The cut wasn't deep, but it was a reminder that he couldn't get careless. He had been lucky this time. At the command center, Commander Rock received news of a second patrol lost. This time, there was no laughter. "Impossible," he roared. "No human could defeat Drac Squad. This must be a special forces team." He turned to his officers. "Deploy 3 full squads. Find these humans and eliminate them." Over the next 2 days, Kim continued his guerrilla campaign against the Night Hunters. Each time, he used their patterns against them. A patrol that always passed through a certain building found the floor collapsed beneath them. A squad that relied on thermal vision to scan for enemies was blinded by heat panels Kim had salvaged from the colony's environmental systems. By the 3rd day, 17 Night Hunters had fallen to Kim's traps and devices. Not one had even seen their attacker. In the command center, panic was setting in. Commander Rock had never experienced anything like this. The Night Hunters had conquered 3 galaxies without a single defeat. Now they were being picked off by an enemy they couldn't even find. "It must be a team of human elites," insisted one officer. "Special operations, using advanced technology." "No," said another. "Our sensors would detect their equipment. This is something else." Commander Rock reviewed the data again. No energy signatures from advanced weapons. No communication signals between multiple attackers. No pattern to the attacks except that they all exploited weaknesses in Turok systems, weaknesses that shouldn't have been known to humans. "It's like a ghost in the system," said a Turok technician. "Something that can see us, but that we cannot see." Rock's anger turned to something the mighty commander had never felt before. Fear. For the first time, the Night Hunters were facing an enemy they didn't understand. "Find this ghost," Rock ordered. "Whatever it takes." Meanwhile, Kim sat in a new hiding place, reviewing the data from his drone. 3 more patrols would pass nearby in the next hour. His arm still hurt from the wound, and he was exhausted from days without proper sleep. But his mind was clearer than ever, seeing patterns within patterns. "They're changing their patrol routes," Kim noted with interest. "But they're still following rules. Just new rules." Kim started making adjustments to his plans. The game was changing, but he was still 3 moves ahead. Kim stood before the colony's emergency broadcast system, his fingers moving quickly across the controls. He had spent hours listening to Turok communications, learning their clicking language by pattern recognition. He didn't understand every word, but he knew enough to create messages that would sound authentic. "Let's see how you like fighting ghosts," Kim muttered as he activated the system. All across New Horizon, Turok warriors heard their communication channels suddenly fill with urgent messages. The voices spoke in perfect Turok military code, reporting human forces converging from multiple directions. The messages included proper authentication codes that Kim had carefully recorded and analyzed. Human forces breaching Sector 4. Heavy weapons detected in Sector 7. Retreat to defensive positions. None of it was real. There were no human forces. Kim was alone, broadcasting from an abandoned control center. But the Turoks didn't know that. In the command center, Commander Rock listened to the flood of reports with growing confusion. His tactical display showed no human forces on their scanners. But the reports kept coming in, each with proper authentication. "Sir, should we reposition our troops?" asked his second-in-command. Rock hesitated. His entire career had been built on decisive action and complete confidence. Now he felt neither. Yes. No. Wait. Verify these reports first. But verification was proving difficult. When Turok patrols reported no enemy contact in the supposedly breached sectors, Kim would broadcast new messages redirecting forces to different areas. He kept the alien forces constantly moving, chasing shadows. Kim didn't stop there. He had discovered that the colony's environmental systems could be controlled remotely. The research facility where he'd first hidden had been studying atmospheric modification for terraforming. Now he put that technology to a different use. In Sector 5, where a full squad of night hunters was searching for him, Kim triggered the atmospheric processors. Suddenly, the air filled with a thin mist containing particles that reflected the specific light frequencies used by Terok vision systems. To the aliens, it was like trying to see through a wall of static. "Can't see. Sensors malfunctioning," reported the squad leader, his voice tight with frustration, requesting permission to withdraw and recalibrate. "Denied." Commander Rock's voice boomed over the comm system. "Continue the search. This is just another human trick." But the squad couldn't function effectively. Their enhanced senses, usually giving them an overwhelming advantage, had become a vulnerability that Kim exploited perfectly. In another sector, Kim released a carefully calculated mixture of gases from the colony's industrial area. The gases were harmless to breathe but absorbed certain frequencies that the Terex used for their scanner systems. An entire patrol found themselves effectively blind, their advanced technology rendered useless. Word spread among the Terok forces. Something was hunting them. Something they couldn't see or fight in their usual way. The night hunters had never known defeat, never known fear. Now they experienced both. "It must be a new human weapon," one warrior told another as they patrolled nervously. "Something that can make them invisible to our sensors." "I heard it's not a weapon, but a team of elite humans," replied another. "Special forces with technology we've never seen before." The rumors grew with each passing hour. Kim's actions took on mythical proportions in the minds of the Terok warriors. A single human had become an army in their imagination. Kim heard their fears through his intercepted communications. He decided to push harder. Using the colony's public address system, Kim broadcast a message on all frequencies, speaking in his own voice for the first time. "Attention Terok forces, you have violated human territory. Your night hunters have proven vulnerable. Your command structure has been compromised. You have one opportunity to withdraw before we deploy our full countermeasures." In the command center, Commander Rock roared with anger. "Find where that transmission is coming from. Now." But Kim had already moved on, leaving behind a simple device that would continue broadcasting random messages on a timer. By the time the Terex found and destroyed it, Kim was halfway across the colony. The psychological impact was devastating. Terok warriors began seeing threats everywhere. They fired at shadows. They requested permission to withdraw from areas where no actual danger existed. Their precision and discipline, once their greatest strengths, began to crumble under the strain of fighting an enemy they couldn't understand. Commander Rock felt his control slipping away. Nothing in his training had prepared him for this situation. The night hunters had always won through superior strength, superior technology, and superior discipline. Now they faced an enemy who turned those advantages into weaknesses. "Sir, perhaps we should consider a tactical withdrawal," suggested his second-in-command. "Regroup and return with different tactics. Withdraw." Before a single human, Rock smashed his fist into a nearby console, shattering its display. "Never. I want every available warrior searching for this human. No more patrols. Flood the colony with our forces. Find him." It was exactly what Kim had hoped for. The careful patrol patterns that he had studied and exploited were being abandoned. The Terex were becoming reactive instead of proactive, emotional instead of logical. They were making mistakes. From his new hiding place, in what had been the colony's water reclamation facility, Kim watched through his drone as Terok warriors rushed through the streets in large groups, weapons ready. They were frightened now, jumping at every sound, firing at anything that moved. "They're burning through power cells," Kim noted, watching their weapons. The plasma rifles required tremendous energy. Used carefully and precisely as the Terex normally did, the power cells would last for days. Used frantically as they were doing now, the cells would be depleted much sooner. Kim accessed the colony's main power grid. Most systems were offline after the invasion, but he could still control what power remained. Carefully, he shut down power to specific sectors, plunging parts of the colony into darkness. The effect on the Terok forces was immediate. Their night vision was excellent, but it relied on neural implants that Kim had already learned to disrupt. In the darkness, with their usual precision abandoned, they became even more disoriented. By the fourth day, Commander Rock had lost 17 more warriors without a single confirmed enemy contact. No bodies had been recovered. Kim's sonic disruptors left the warriors unconscious but alive, and he had continued this approach, unable to kill helpless enemies even if they were aliens. The command center had become a scene of chaos. Rock had destroyed several more consoles in his rage. His officers flinched when he approached. The mighty commander of the undefeated Night Hunters was coming apart, and his warriors could see it. "Sir," said his second-in-command carefully, "our warriors report feeling fear. This is unprecedented. Fear. Night Hunters do not fear." Rock bellowed, but his voice carried a note of desperation. They did fear now. Kim had accomplished what no enemy had ever done before. He had turned the Night Hunters' certainty of victory into doubt, their arrogance into fear. And he was just getting started. Kim stood outside the Terok Command Center, his heart beating fast. 5 days had passed since the invasion began. 5 days since he had been separated from his unit. In that time, he had defeated 34 Night Hunters without firing a single conventional shot. Now it was time to end this. The command center was heavily guarded. 6 Night Hunters stood at the entrance, their weapons ready. But Kim had planned for this moment carefully. He activated his final creation, a neural disruptor unlike any he had made before. This one didn't just confuse or disorient. It sent a specific signal that mimicked the Terok command frequency, making their neural implants register him as Commander Rock himself. Kim walked calmly toward the entrance. The guards saw him coming but didn't raise their weapons. Instead, they stood at attention. In their enhanced vision, distorted by Kim's device, they saw not a small human soldier but their mighty commander. "Status report," Kim said in broken Terok language, words he had practiced carefully. The lead guard responded with clicks and growls that Kim couldn't fully understand. But the guard's body language was clear: respect and obedience. Kim nodded and walked past them into the command center. Inside, technicians and warriors worked at stations monitoring the colony. Kim kept his device active, projecting the commander's identity signature. He walked purposefully through the facility, following the map he had memorized from his earlier surveillance. A few Teroks looked up as he passed, their expressions showing confusion that was quickly replaced by deference. The illusion wasn't perfect. Up close, some could tell something was wrong. But Kim moved quickly, not giving anyone time to question what they were seeing. Finally, he reached the central command room. Through the doorway, he could see Commander Rock himself, surrounded by his personal guard. The commander was massive even for a Terok, his exoskeleton more advanced than any Kim had seen before. Rock was shouting at his officers, his rage evident even across species. Kim's device wouldn't fool the real Rock. He needed a different approach. From his pack, Kim took out a small drone he had modified. He activated it and sent it into the room. The drone emitted a specific frequency that interfered with the Terok's sensory systems, not enough to incapacitate them, but enough to distract them. As the Teroks turned toward the drone, Kim slipped into the room, staying in the blind spots he had identified in Terok vision. He moved silently around the perimeter of the room, placing small devices at key points, each one designed to emit a specific disruption pattern when activated. Commander Rock suddenly turned, sensing something wrong. "Intruder," he roared, his translator converting his words to human language. Kim had been spotted. There was no more time for stealth. He pressed the activation button on his remote. All around the room, his devices activated simultaneously. Each one produced a different disruption pattern. Some affected vision, some hearing, some the neural implants that connected the Terraks to their technology. The combined effect was devastating. The Terrak officers collapsed, their enhanced senses completely overwhelmed. Only Commander Rock remained standing, though he staggered, his massive hands clutching his helmet. "What is this?" Rock growled, fighting through the disruption. The commander's personal guard tried to aim their weapons at Kim, but they couldn't focus. Two fell to their knees. One fired wildly, hitting a console instead of Kim. Kim stepped forward, facing Commander Rock directly for the first time. The contrast between them was almost comical. The small human soldier facing the massive alien commander. "This is the terrible warrior who destroyed my night hunters," Rock said in disbelief, his translator making his words understandable to Kim. Despite the disruption affecting him, Rock's size and enhanced systems allowed him to resist better than his warriors. Kim said nothing. He simply activated his final device, a neural disruptor specifically calibrated to the unique frequency of Commander Rock's advanced neural implants. Kim had detected this frequency during his surveillance, recognizing it as different from the standard Terrak pattern. The effect was immediate. The mighty commander fell to his knees, his systems unable to process the overwhelming input. "How?" Rock managed to ask, his voice distorted by his failing translator. "How did one human defeat the Night Hunters?" "You relied too much on your technology," Kim explained, knowing the commander could still hear him even if he couldn't respond. "You followed rigid patterns. You never adapted. You thought your strength was in your size and your weapons, but those were actually your weaknesses." Kim walked to the command console. He activated the colony's emergency broadcast system, sending a message on all frequencies, both Terrak and human. "This is Private Kim of the 87th Terran Defense Battalion. The Terrak Command Center has been neutralized. I repeat, the Terrak Command Center has been neutralized." For good measure, Kim activated the colony's distress beacon, a signal that would reach any human ships in the sector. Commander Rock watched from his knees, unable to move but still conscious. The mighty leader of the undefeated Night Hunters had been brought down by the smallest, weakest human soldier. "You should have killed me," Rock said, his translator sputtering. Kim shook his head. "That's not how humans win. We don't need to destroy you to defeat you." 6 hours later, human reinforcements arrived. The cruiser Dauntless had picked up the distress signal and responded immediately, dispatching Marines to secure the colony. Lieutenant Choi, Kim's squad leader, was among the first to enter the command center. He stopped in shock at the sight before him. 7 Terrak officers and Commander Rock himself, all restrained and under guard by a single human private. "Kim, is that you?" Lieutenant Choi asked in disbelief. Kim stood and saluted. "Private Kim reporting, sir. The Terrak command has been neutralized." "But how?" "Our intel said they had at least 60 Night Hunters here." "They did, sir," Kim confirmed. "I had to neutralize them first before I could reach the command center." The Marines looked at each other in disbelief. The small private they remembered, the one who had failed combat simulations and been the subject of jokes, had defeated the most feared fighting force in the galaxy. In the following days, the full story emerged. The human fleet arrived in force, securing New Horizon and driving the remaining Terrak forces from the system. 34 Night Hunters were found unconscious throughout the colony, each disabled by Kim's devices. Not one had been killed, an act of mercy that would later become significant in peace negotiations with the Terrak Empire. Commander Rock and his officers were taken as prisoners of war. The Night Hunters' reputation for invincibility was shattered forever. 1 week after the liberation of New Horizon, General Park, commander of human forces in the sector, personally decorated Private Kim. The general read from the official report. "Private Kim has demonstrated that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our physical prowess. It's our adaptability, creativity, and refusal to accept the limitations others place on us. In the face of overwhelming odds, one soldier with these qualities proved more effective than an army without them. As Kin received his medal, he thought about Drill Sergeant Park, who had called him weak, about his fellow soldiers who had mocked his size, about all the tests he had failed because they measured the wrong things. The smallest soldier in the 87th Battalion had just shown the galaxy what true strength looked like. The end.